Zohran Mamdani just did something most political experts said was impossible. He won the New York City mayoral election against massive opposition. The president endorsed his opponent. Billionaires funded campaigns against him. Famous celebrities publicly backed the other side. The political establishment united to stop him. Every odd was stacked against him, and yet he won. But this video isn't about Zohran Mamdani's life story. This isn't about politics or elections. This is about something far more fundamental. How do some people develop the mindset to fight and win when everything is against them? While most people would have quit, withdrawn their candidacy, or accepted defeat, what makes certain individuals push forward anyway? There's something different about these people, something you can't quite put your finger on. They face the same opposition everyone else does, the same rejection, the same obstacles, the same voices telling them it's impossible. But while most people crumble under that pressure, these individuals transform it into fuel. Winning against all odds isn't about luck. It's not about being more talented or working harder, though that helps. It's about how you respond when the entire world is telling you to quit. Today, I'm going to share the psychological principles that separate those who collapse under pressure from those who rise through it. These aren't motivational slogans. These are scientifically backed strategies proven to work. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe to our channel, which helps to grow it and spread knowledge to others. And now, let's dive into how you can develop the mindset to win against all odds. The first thing you need to understand about winning against all odds is that it starts with a fundamental shift in how you interpret challenges. Most people have been conditioned to see challenges as threats, as barriers, as evidence that they're on the wrong path. But here's what research in psychology tells us. The most successful people in the world don't see challenges as threats. They see them as opportunities. And this isn't just positive thinking. This is a cognitive reframe that actually changes how your brain responds to difficulty. Dr. Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist, spent decades studying what she calls growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And what she found is remarkable. People with a fixed mindset believe their abilities are static. So when they face a challenge, they interpret it as evidence of their limitations. They think this is hard because I'm not good enough. But people with a growth mindset see challenges completely differently. They believe abilities can be developed. So when they face difficulty, they interpret it as an opportunity to grow. They think this is hard because I'm being stretched, because I'm learning, because I'm becoming stronger. And here's the critical part. It's not the challenge itself that determines success or failure. It's the interpretation of that challenge. Two people can face the exact same obstacle, same circumstances, same resources, same difficulty. But one person will quit while the other perseveres. Why? Because they're telling themselves different stories about what that challenge means. Think about Nelson Mandela. When he was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964, he could have interpreted that as the end, as proof that his fight for justice was hopeless. But instead, he told himself a different story. He said to the court, "I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." 26 years later, he walked out of that prison. And 4 years after that, he became president of South Africa. The challenge didn't change. His circumstances were brutal, unjust, seemingly insurmountable. But his interpretation of those circumstances gave him the strength to endure, and eventually, to win. This is what psychologists call cognitive reframing, the ability to take a negative situation and find a different way to think about it. And it's one of the most powerful tools you have. Because you can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control how you interpret what happens to you. But interpretation alone isn't enough. Because knowing that challenges are opportunities doesn't make them easier to face. You also need something else, something deeper. You need a reason. Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he makes a profound observation. He says that the prisoners who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or the healthiest. They were the ones who had a reason to live, a purpose that was bigger than their suffering. Some had family members they were determined to see again. Some had a cause they were committed to fighting for. Some had a deep spiritual belief that gave them strength. But all of them had something in common. They had a why, a reason that made survival not just possible, but necessary. Frankl famously said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And this principle applies to every challenge you'll ever face. Your reason, your why, is what gives you the power to keep going when logic says you should stop. Think about the single mother working 2 jobs to put her kids through school. Think about the entrepreneur who mortgages everything to build a business. Think about the athlete training through injury to compete one more time. What keeps them going isn't that the path is easy. It's that their reason is bigger than their pain. And here's what most people get wrong. They think you need motivation to take action. But that's backwards. Motivation fades when things get hard. What you actually need is a compelling reason. A why that's so powerful that quitting simply isn't an option. So let me ask you, what's your why? What's the thing that matters so much to you that you'd be willing to suffer for it, to sacrifice for it, to keep pushing even when you want to quit? Because if you don't have a clear answer to that question, you're going to struggle. Not because you lack ability, but because you lack a reason to fully use that ability. The people who win against all odds aren't more talented than you. They're not luckier than you. They just have a reason that's strong enough to carry them through the moments when talent and luck run out. And if you can identify that reason for yourself, if you can connect to it deeply enough that it becomes part of your identity, you become almost unstoppable. Now, having a strong reason is essential. But there's another element that separates winners from quitters, and that's ownership. Complete, total, uncompromising ownership of your life. Most people give away their power without even realizing it. They blame circumstances. They blame other people. They blame bad luck. They say things like, "It's not fair," or "I didn't have the same opportunities," or "if only things were different." And every time they do that, they make themselves weaker. Here's why. When you blame external factors for your problems, you're essentially saying that you have no control over your situation. And if you have no control, then there's nothing you can do. You've given away your power to change things. You've made yourself a victim. But the people who win against all odds, they take radical ownership of everything. Even things that aren't their fault. Even circumstances they didn't create. Even problems they inherited from others. They take ownership because ownership gives them power. If you own the problem, you own the solution. If you take responsibility for where you are, you take control of where you're going. This doesn't mean you ignore injustice or pretend that circumstances don't matter. It means you refuse to let those circumstances define your potential. There's a powerful concept in psychology called locus of control. People with an internal locus of control believe that they are primarily responsible for what happens in their lives. People with an external locus of control believe that outside forces determine their outcomes. And research consistently shows that people with an internal locus of control are more successful, more resilient, and better able to overcome adversity. Why? because they see themselves as active agents in their own lives rather than passive victims of circumstance. They ask, "What can I do about this?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" And that shift in perspective changes everything. Think about someone who loses their job. One person might say the economy is terrible, there are no opportunities, this isn't fair. Another person might say this is a wake-up call, I need to upgrade my skills. I'm going to use this time to reinvent myself. Same situation, completely different response. And that response determines the outcome. So here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, practice radical ownership. Every time something goes wrong, resist the urge to blame someone or something else. Instead, ask yourself, what's my responsibility here? What can I control? What action can I take? Because the moment you stop making excuses and start taking ownership, you reclaim your power. And with that power, you can overcome almost anything. Now, taking ownership is crucial. But there's something else that people who win against all odds understand, and that's the power of action. Specifically, taking action before you feel ready. Most people wait. They wait until they have the perfect plan. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until conditions are ideal. And while they're waiting, they're losing momentum, they're losing time, they're losing the battle. But the people who win, they move, even when they don't have all the answers, even when they're scared, even when success isn't guaranteed. They take action because they understand something fundamental. Momentum is created by movement. Dr. Roy Baumeister, a social psychologist, discovered that willpower and self-control work like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they become. But here's the catch. You have to start using them even when they're weak. You have to take that first step even when you don't feel like it. Because every time you take action, despite fear or uncertainty, you're training your brain to be stronger. Imagine you're standing at the bottom of a mountain. The peak is so far away you can't even see it. Most people look at that mountain and get overwhelmed. They think, I'll never make it to the top, so why even start? But the person who wins against all odds doesn't think about the peak. They think about the next step, just one step, and then another, and another. Each step creates momentum, and momentum makes the next step easier. And before long, they look back and realize they've covered more distance than they ever thought possible. Not because they had a perfect plan, not because they felt ready, but because they kept moving. This is why many successful businesses were built by people who had no idea what they were doing when they started. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait until they figured everything out. They took action, learned from it, adjusted, and took more action. And that cycle of action and learning created momentum that carried them to success. So when you're facing a challenge that feels impossible, don't wait until you have the perfect plan. Take one action, any action. Make a phone call, send an email, do some research, start writing, start building, start something. Because action creates momentum, and momentum creates results, and results create confidence, and confidence creates more action. It's a winning against all odds requires more than just action. It requires a specific kind of action, strategic action guided by focus. Most people scatter their energy. They try to do too many things at once. They get distracted by what everyone else is doing. They chase every opportunity, and in the process, they dilute their effectiveness. They become busy, but not productive, active, but not effective. The people who win understand the power of focus. They identify the one thing that matters most, the lever that, if moved, will create the biggest impact. And then they pour all their energy into that one thing. They say no to almost everything else. Not because those other things aren't valuable, but because focus requires sacrifice. Dr. Anders Ericsson, who studied peak performance for decades, found that world-class performers in any field share one common trait. They engage in what he calls deliberate practice. This isn't just putting in time. It's focusing intensely on specific skills that need improvement. It's quality over quantity. It's depth over breadth. Think about someone learning to play an instrument. The person who practices casually for an hour every day will improve slowly. But the person who spends 30 minutes on deliberate, focused practice on their weakest areas will improve dramatically faster. Same time investment, completely different results. The difference is focus. And this principle applies to everything. If you're trying to build a business, you can't do everything at once. You need to identify the one activity that will generate the most revenue or the most growth and focus on that relentlessly. If you're trying to improve your health, you can't change everything overnight. You need to focus on the one habit that will create the biggest positive cascade. So ask yourself, what's the one thing that, if you focused on it completely, would change everything? What's the lever? What's the highest impact activity? And what are you willing to eliminate or delegate so you can focus on that one thing? Because scattered energy creates scattered results, but focused energy creates breakthroughs. Now, all of this, the right interpretation, a strong reason, radical ownership, consistent action, and focused effort, all of this matters. But there's one more element that determines whether you win against all odds, and that's resilience, the ability to get back up every single time life knocks you down. You will fail. You will face setbacks. You will experience moments where you wonder if you can keep going. And in those moments, your resilience will determine everything. Resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And you build it by training yourself to respond to adversity in a specific way, not by avoiding difficulty, but by facing it, learning from it, and refusing to stay down. Dr. Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, studied resilience extensively, and he found that resilient people share three core beliefs. First, they believe that setbacks are temporary, not permanent. Second, they believe that challenges are specific to one area of their life, not evidence of total failure. And third, they don't personalize failure. They don't say, "I'm a failure." They say, "I failed at this particular thing." These three beliefs create what Seligman calls learned optimism, the ability to maintain hope and keep moving forward even in the face of repeated failure. And the good news is that these beliefs can be developed. You can train yourself to think this way. Every time you face a setback, practice reframing it. Instead of saying everything is ruined, say this particular thing didn't work. Instead of thinking I'll never succeed, think I haven't succeeded yet. Instead of believing I'm not good enough, tell yourself I'm still learning. This isn't about denying reality. It's about refusing to let temporary failure define your permanent potential. Because every person who has achieved anything significant has failed repeatedly. The difference is that they didn't let failure define them. They used it to refine them. Think about Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. When someone asked him how it felt to fail so many times, he said, "I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that don't work." That's resilience. The ability to reframe failure as feedback, to see setbacks as data points rather than dead ends. And this is what separates the people who eventually win from the people who quit. Not talent, not luck, not even hard work. It's the willingness to keep going after everyone else has stopped. It's the refusal to accept defeat. It's the deep internal belief that if you keep moving forward, eventually you'll find a way through. So, let me bring this all together. Because everything I've shared with you builds toward one central truth. Winning against all odds isn't about being superhuman. It's about being strategic with how you think, how you act, and how you respond to difficulty. It starts with reframing challenges as opportunities, with understanding that obstacles aren't barriers, they're tests. They're chances to prove to yourself what you're capable of. And when you shift your interpretation of challenges, you shift your entire relationship with difficulty. Then you need a compelling reason, a why that's so strong that quitting simply isn't an option. Because motivation fades, but purpose endures. And when you have a purpose that's bigger than your pain, you become capable of incredible things. Next, you take radical ownership. You stop blaming circumstances and start taking responsibility for your situation. Because ownership gives you power, and with that power, you can change almost anything. Then, you take action. Before you feel ready, before you have all the answers, before conditions are perfect, you move. Because momentum is created by movement, and momentum carries you further than planning ever could. You focus that action on the highest impact activities. You say no to distractions. You identify the one thing that matters most, and you pour your energy into it. Because scattered effort creates scattered results, but focused effort creates breakthroughs. And finally, you build resilience. You train yourself to see setbacks as temporary, to learn from failure, to get back up every single time life knocks you down. Because resilience is the ultimate competitive advantage. It's what allows you to outlast everyone else. These aren't secrets. They're not hidden knowledge that only a few people have access to. They're principles. And principles work. They work for anyone who's willing to apply them. They work regardless of your background, your circumstances, or your starting point. So here's my challenge to you. Take one of these principles and apply it today. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Today. Choose the interpretation that empowers you instead of the one that limits you. Clarify your reason for doing what you're doing. Take ownership of something you've been blaming others for. Take one action you've been putting off. Focus on the one thing that matters most. Or practice resilience by reframing a recent failure. Just pick one and do it. Because knowing these principles doesn't change anything. Applying them does. And every time you apply one of these principles, you become a little bit stronger, a little bit more capable, a little bit closer to becoming the kind of person who wins against all odds. You have what it takes, not because you're special, not because you're lucky, but because you're human. And every human being has the capacity to develop these traits. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it requires sacrifice. Yes, there will be moments when you want to quit. But that's exactly the point. The difficulty is what makes it valuable. The struggle is what makes you stronger. The adversity is what transforms you from someone who hopes to win into someone who refuses to lose. The world doesn't need more people who give up when things get hard. It needs people who rise when they're tested. People who find a way when there seems to be no way. People who refuse to let circumstances define their potential. And you can be that person. Not someday. Not when conditions are perfect. Right now. Today. With the challenge you're currently facing. Because that challenge isn't there to stop you. It's there to reveal what you're truly capable of. So the next time you face something that feels impossible, remember this. Every person who has ever won against all odds started exactly where you are. Uncertain, afraid, facing obstacles that seemed too big to overcome. But they moved forward anyway. They took one step, and then another. And eventually, impossibly, they found their way through. You can do the same, because winning against all odds isn't about being extraordinary. It's about doing ordinary things with extraordinary consistency and refusing to quit until you succeed. So, which principle resonated most with you? Which one are you going to apply first? Drop a comment below and let me know. And subscribe for more content that explores how to build the mental strength to overcome anything life throws at you. Remember, winning against all odds doesn't mean the odds weren't real. It means you were stronger than the odds. And that strength is available to you right now. You just have to choose to use it.